Hello, everyone. This is a presentation accompanying my final paper for ATHS 697 in fulfillment of the culmination of the master's program in Assistive Technology Studies and Human Services at Cal State Northridge. My name is Melissa Cardenas-Dow, and my final paper and presentation is entitled The Roles and Functions of University Library Services in AT Support for Students with Learning Disabilities in Higher Education. This presentation will provide an overview of the main points I present in the paper. Each slide corresponds to the different program learning outcomes that my final paper addresses. While the topic of the paper and presentation is the role and functions of university library services in AT support for students with learning disabilities, the main thrust is addressing the program learning outcomes identified. The program learning outcomes covered are the first, second, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth program learning outcomes. Let us begin. The first PLO covered is to identify, distinguish, and synthesize the interconnections between human and technological factors. This is covered in the second chapters of my final paper, entitled The Interconnections of Human and Technological Factors. In examining the interconnections of human and technological factors within the topic of the roles and functions of university library services at AT support for students with learning disabilities in higher education, I examined the goals, objectives, and purpose of three aspects of higher education institutions: the departments providing services to students with disabilities, or SSWD, the university library, and a university institution. While the purpose, goals, and objectives of each can be highly fought over and fraught with conflict, they ultimately have the intellectual independence of all students as their ultimate goal. Student independence is often called different names, and the concepts they evoke emphasize different aspects of independence. Student independence is often called student success and academic achievement. Both SSWD and university libraries are university departments that play important roles in achieving student independence. SSWD departments accomplish this by providing programs and services that focus on modifying the educational environment, inspiring change within the student, or both. University libraries must provide services to all members of the university community through their physical and virtual spaces and the information resources they provide. The second PLO addressed is to describe and infer the implications and possible effects of assistive technologies as they move through different social, generational, and cultural contexts. Within the higher education setting, one of the biggest hindrances to academic success for students with learning disabilities is the performance expectations that commonly anticipate that any student is prepared to conduct academic work independently and at a faster pace. These expectations pose significant obstacles for many students with disabilities, especially if they have not been adequately prepared for transition, because they come from the K-12 context that has parents and special education services conduct decision-making on their behalf. In contrast, higher education often places the burden of disability identification, disclosure, and accommodations management onto the students themselves. Students who are not prepared to act autonomously and independently will likely not meet with academic success. As technology training is an important part of the performance expectations of successful university students, students with disabilities not only have to have adequate training in the use of their AT devices and software, they must also have adequate training on the use of technology prevalent in their university programs and classrooms in order to accomplish their academic work. Within the context of higher education institutional settings, the tension between visibility and invisibility, a human factor, has service implications for SSW departments and academic libraries. Students must choose to be visible in order to access university-provided accommodations. The fourth PLO is to explain and illustrate relevant concepts. Within the topic of the roles and functions of university library services in AT support for students with learning disabilities in higher education, the medical and psychosocial mental models of disability can be linked to two dominant approaches to service delivery: the accommodations approach and the universal design approach. The accommodations model within universities is very much linked to the medical model of disability. Documentation must be provided by the student before any accommodation is granted. If documentation is inadequate, testing and diagnosis need to take place. Afterwards, a determination is made regarding what sorts of accommodations are reasonable. The implication here is that the individual carries a deficit that must be corrected in order to mitigate the inaccessibility of the educational environment. In contrast, the universal design approach is proactive. It deals with access and the elimination of barriers as a given. It is important to remember that while the accommodations approach to services arguably correlates with the medical model of disability, SSW departments provide an important means to attaining educational goals for many students with disabilities. Many SSWD departments also function as campus advocates for students with disabilities, advocating for universal design in the creation and development of educational environments, programs, services, and curriculum. In this sense, many SSW departments mix the two models of disability in their approach. The decision-making process of SSWD departments and university libraries is the focus of the fifth chapter of my paper. In that chapter, the fifth and sixth PLOs are discussed in light of the topic of the role and functions of university library services. The fifth PLO is to describe and apply relevant leadership and group dynamic skills, while the sixth PLO covers problem solve and think critically across the multidisciplinary fields that encompass assistive technologies and services. My focus on decision-making processes is my attempt to discuss the common aspects of both PLOs, which involve applying skills to solve problems. In the specific case of SSWD departments and university libraries, this involves understanding where they are located in the operation of the university institution. For the purposes of this presentation in my final paper for this program, I've located both SSWD departments and university libraries within the administrative shell of the university, a description used by John Lombardi in his book, How Universities Work. He describes the administrative shell as responsive to the concerns within the university's academic core of faculty departments that oversee curriculum and content, as well as their quality. The administrative shell is also responsive to societal issues and concerns. The historical development of SSWD departments is an example of this, as many came to be as part of legislative mandates and the imperative for universities to comply by providing accommodations and maintaining documentation. Collaboration is a significant decision-making activity that is part of the important work of SSWD departments. In collaborating with academic libraries, however, SSWD departments have the opportunity to address the accessibility of information sources available in the library. Addressing the accessibility of online information sources can be termed as a second digital divide, which can be significant in an environment that is considered to have made strides in closing the first digital divide, which is access to information technology. The second digital divide, which poses a barrier to participation and access to online information, is an important consideration when, as an example, academic libraries are prioritizing electronic and online resources needed for academic success. In addressing the seventh PLO, comprehend and relevantly apply professional ethics in the workplace, I examined the ethical tenets of SSWD departments and academic libraries. I had mentioned earlier that SSWD departments are focused on improving the educational experiences of students with disabilities. University libraries, on the other hand, are committed to academic success and attainment of all its patrons, students, faculty, and staff within the university community. Both the functions of the SSWD departments and academic libraries, as well as the respective professionals who work in each setting, are governed by professional guidelines and ethical standards. For SSWD departments and professionals, I examined the professional guidelines and professional ethics published by the Association on Higher Education and Disability, or AHED. For academic libraries, I looked at documents published by the American Library Association, or ALA, and the Association of Colleges and Research Libraries, or ACRL. For both SSWD and university libraries, the professional associations that publish their ethical standards and professional guidelines support educational excellence of the parent institution and express the purpose and goal of the respective departments and their professionals to act accordingly. In order to examine the ethical expectations in both professions, I focused on three areas of concern through which to discuss ethics: privacy and confidentiality, academic freedom, and informed consent. All three professional organizations, AHED, ALA, and ACRL, value privacy and confidentiality. The integrity of student records is a matter of ethical consideration among disability services professionals. Likewise, patron privacy is an important matter of concern for librarians, regardless of their work setting. However, AHED is silent on the matter of academic freedom, except for its explicit support of educational excellence. In contrast, ACRL links academic freedom with intellectual freedom, which places value on the ability of library patrons to pursue knowledge with little to no hindrance. All three professional organizations do not use the phrase informed consent. However, they do include the importance of the client or patron to be informed and have the ability to provide consent throughout any process that can affect the quality of their experiences and existence. The second to the last chapter of my final paper focuses on the sixth and eighth PLOs. The sixth states problem solve and think critically across the multidisciplinary fields that encompass assistive technologies and services. The eighth is to develop, assess, and analyze relevant regulatory policies. To accomplish both PLOs, I focused on the policies that govern services to students with learning disabilities and library services to students at Sacramento State University. Since universities are complex institutions with many different levels of regulatory policies, it is important to identify system-wide and university-level policies that affect the departmental policies of SSWD departments and academic libraries. In addition to the federal and state laws with which the California State University system and Sacramento State University must comply, both the CSU system and Sacramento State University have developed their own policies affecting students with disabilities in general. The Academic Program Access to Students with Disabilities policy is a university-wide specific policy that declares equal access to students with disabilities through reasonable accommodations and auxiliary aids. The policy states, the university's goal is to provide an equivalent academic experience and learning opportunity, not to guarantee the outcome of the student's educational endeavor. The university views the provision of reasonable accommodation for students with disabilities as a cooperative effort involving administrators, faculty, staff, and students. The Accessible Technology Policy is adapted from the California State University Board of Trustees Policy on Disability Support and Accommodations, or Executive Order 926. The Accessible Technology Policy is also university-specific, but seeks to comply with Executive Order 926 and states that Sacramento State University strives for an inclusive educational environment by ensuring that its information technology resources and infrastructure are accessible to all students, faculty, staff, and the visiting public, regardless of ability. The Accessible Technology Policy makes ample reference to the CSU Academic Senate Resolution on Programs and Services to Individuals with Disabilities, which gives detailed statements of support for students and CSU employees with disabilities, requiring accommodations, AT, and auxiliary aids. At the departmental level, Sacramento State's SSWD department does not provide its policies online. However, it does offer resources, such as the SSWD Learning Disabilities Handbook for Students/Faculty, as well as the department's annual reports. While the Sacramento State University Library provide its behavioral policies online, they do not draw a distinct line between professional standards and ethics and the policies followed by library employees and patrons. Making the connection between professional standards and ethics and departmental policies governing services and programs provided by both Sacramento State's SSWD department and university library would be small but significant improvements. My final paper for the ATHS 697 class has a list of references. Some of the more important research articles are also listed here and the presentation handout. There are 3 reference slides available in this presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope this brief presentation on the various nuances of my final paper has been informative and helpful.